What's going on, everyone? So welcome to my latest video. This is part of a series where I focus on Academy Award Best Picture nominees from a certain year, from such years of the past as from 2000 all the way to 2013, and you guessed it because you clicked on this video. This time around, I'm focusing on the Academy Award Best Picture nominees of 2014 and ranking them from worst to best. Now, similar from 2009 to now 2014, this is where the Academy said, hey, we're going to have it where up until 10 Best Picture nominees, that's what the possibility will be. Prior to 2009, it was always 5 Best Picture nominees. And they had it where they decided that, hey, up until, they're not going to have it where there's going to be actually 10. It was like 2009, 2010 where they said, yeah, we'll have 10. But after that, it was always just like, a weird number of like 8 or 9, something like that. For 2014, there was the odd number, well, even number, I guess you could say, of 8 Best Picture nominees. So I'll be ranking them from 8 being the worst to 1 being the best, and of course, my humble opinion. And then, of course, I forgot to mention this. I mentioned in the previous video, but the reason why it was an odd number is even even number, and not 10 is because of preferential voting. So that's the reason for such. But anyways, guys, enough exposition. Let's get started. So kicking things off with number 8, we have American Sniper, or as I like to call it, American Sniper. This is a solid film. I can't lie. I actually loved it when it first came out. I saw it twice in theaters. I quite liked this when I saw it, but rewatched it recently, and I wasn't as big of a fan. I think it's a solid film for sure, but I feel like the rewatchability value just really isn't that high for this film. Upon giving it a third chance, it's well acted for sure. It's well intended, but it does kind of feel like a lesser version of other films that we've seen in the past. I think the biggest one that comes to mind is like it's very like Hurt Locker-esque. I can see why some people really dug this film. I can. I was one of those people, but for now, I think that it's the worst of the lot, but it's still a solid film as its own. And yeah, that's why American Sniper is my number 8. Next up, my number 7 is The Theory of Everything. So this is a film that's about Stephen Hawking. It is following a lot of biopic conventions. I'm just going to say this right off the bat. A lot of biopic conventions, similar to American Sniper, following a lot of war picture, conventions. The Theory of Everything I like a bit more, though, because I do feel like the score stands out more. I think that the lead performance by Eddie Raymond is really, really quite something. It's visually appealing. It's visually quite interesting. And it does stand out a little bit more in terms of being a biopic. Like, again, it has the conventions of a biopic, like that it follows pretty sturdily, but at the same time, there are certain things that I think have a nice little flair to it that make it kind of stand above being just an average biopic. Is it very rewatchable? No, I've seen it like a couple times. But I do still stand by that I do like it, even though I do know that it does have its fair share of flaws. But yeah, that's why it's my number 7. Next up, my number 6 is Selma. I liked this movie quite a bit when I saw it in theaters. I have not seen it since, though. That being said, it is a film that I still look at very fondly. I quite like this movie. It is very historically accurate. Like, if you look it up, there is a lot of attention to details about this film. And I think that that's also something that's really interesting because it's one of those films you can look at and say, yeah, look at this film, watch this film. It's very important. And it is very important. It's a very well put together film. It's got a great lead performance, very well shot, very expertly edited. It's a film that I definitely am looking forward to revisiting because I can't lie, I have been itching for a rewatch of this film. I would definitely recommend people to watch this film at least once. That's why it is my number 6. But there were 5 other films I liked better. My number 5 is, truthfully, my number 5 is a film that I feel like I should switch out and have Selma be over it, but I'm going to stand by this. My number 5 is The Imitation Game. The Imitation Game does follow some biopic conventions. That is true. But I think the directing of this film is very, very, very engaging. I quite like this film. I think that this film is very well put together, and I think that it's so well put together that I oftentimes forget about the biopic conventions that it does follow, similar to The Theory of Everything. But where Selma is a film that I saw one time, The Imitation Game I've seen, I would say, a handful of times. And that's why I'm glad I own it on Blu-ray, because I do feel from time to time, I'm like, you know what, The Imitation Game, I want to revisit. Alexander Desplat's score is outstanding. Benedict Cumberbatch's performance is really, really good. Interesting production design. It's a well-edited, well-paced film. I think that even if you know the story of Alan Turing, and truthfully, there are some things that they either didn't include or kind of misrepresented, those things aside, I do think that it is a film that everyone should watch at least once. I quite like it. Again, I know that it has its issues for sure, but I do quite like The Imitation Game. And yeah, that's why I'm standing by it being my number 5. Next up, my number 4. This is a film that for the longest time was my favorite film of 2014. And my number 4 is Boyhood, a film that took 12 years to make. The lead actor, they actually were watching him grow up from age 6 to 18. It is a fascinating concept. The actual execution is really good. I love it. I think it is a great film, and I still stand by that. Like, I know that it makes it sound like, oh, I didn't like it as much. I still love Boyhood. I do. It just doesn't have as much of an impact on me as it once did. But at the time, it really did. And I still stand by that. I think it's a great film. But there were 3 other films that I like more. I'm not as angry. I'm not as upset as it not winning Best Picture. I was very upset when it didn't win Best Picture at the time. But like I said, I still stand by it. It's a great film. It is a slice of life film, and I want to emphasize that because I know some people might be like, it's boring. There's not much that happens. Well, it's a slice of life film. So you're just following these characters doing, mundane, everyday things that sometimes will work for some, other times it won't. That's the style of Richard Linklater, though. And for me, he's very hit or miss, but here it was definitely a hit, and this is one of my favorite films of his. And yeah, that is why Boyhood's my number 4. Next up, my number 3 is Whiplash. I love Whiplash. I saw this in theaters. Forgot to also mention, I saw Boyhood in theaters, but Whiplash I saw in theaters with friends, and holy cow. This is a film that it's got a high rewatchability value, but it's also got outstanding filmmaking. One of the best films from the 2010s, hands down. Holy cow. This is a film that I love it. I love it. I think that it is a thriller somehow, but it's a thriller, but it's also a drama, and it's got like that Black Swan kind of vibes to it, minus not being as weird, but it's got that Black Swan kind of vibe. And actually there is a video comparing the two, and I think that Whiplash manages to take like the the bare bones ideas of the plot threads of Black Swan, but making it its own. Giselle's directing here is quite strong. I think it's a masterpiece. It's a masterclass in acting. If you haven't noticed already, I highly urge you to check out Whiplash. You won't regret it. But yeah, that is my number 3. Next up, my number 2 is Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance. This is the film that won Best Picture in 2014, and when it won Best Picture, I wasn't happy that it won Best Picture, despite really liking it. I mean, I saw this film twice in theaters, but I was just upset at the time for Boyhood losing out on Best Picture to Birdman. I'll never forget that. I was so upset. But it's funny how years later, again, time only tells with film, and how much you can change also, but like, Boyhood, I've seen less times now than Birdman. Birdman's the film I constantly seem to come back to. But again, I still love Boyhood. But Birdman, I find myself finding more and more meaning to it, and just loving it more and more. I wrote an entire essay pretty much on my latest viewing of it on Letterboxd. I love Birdman. I think it's a great film. It's not for everyone. It's not for everyone. But I think that if you're on its wavelength, you'll really dig it. And yeah, I loved it. I honestly, it winning Best Picture, I'm happy, even though I gotta say there was another Best Picture nominee that I do think should have won, even though I know it had a snowball chances in hell winning, because it's very, very quirky. But my number 1 favorite comedy of all time is The Grand Budapest Hotel. I love this film. I really do. It won a bunch of Oscars, for the technical aspects like score, makeup, categories like that. If it had won Best Picture, man, I would have been really happy. This film was the first one I saw as an 18-year-old. On my birthday, I actually watched it. And I love it. Man, I got to say, it's got such high rewatchability value. It's very clever. The story within a story within a story aspect is something I love. It's got interesting characters. It's a comedy, but it's also a drama. And the balance between the two are really quite something. Not for everyone, because Wes Anderson, let's face it, really isn't for everyone. But I do think it's a film that, if you're on its wavelength, similar to Birdman, I think that you'll get a lot from it, because it is deceptively deep, in my personal opinion. But yeah, I love The Grand Budapest Hotel. That's why it is my number 1. But yeah, guys, that's my ranking for the 2014 Best Picture nominees. Let me know your ranking down below. And guys, if you haven't done so already, don't forget the subscription, notification bell, follow me down on Letterboxd, and I will catch you guys later.